maybe let's go over some of the, training that we did. How do we kind of program all those training sessions for the meet and the build up to it? How do we plan our taper? Maybe we should maybe change some of that. But
Definitely gonna change some of that. Yeah.
yeah, so
So,
yeah, what do you remember from that?
well, I mean, I remember like we met up at the coffee shop one day. We're just kind of like going over like templates that we came up with, and we're like kind of like going back and forth about like, oh, what we should do, this and that. And like, obviously, like in a perfect world, as a powerlifter, like if you want like the best results and you're going like off pure theory, it's like I want to do as many sets as possible, as many times a week as possible, with purely the competition movement because it's as specific as possible and you're getting as much volume in for that. But is that feasible? No,
Mm.
right? Like I really doubt that most people are going to be able to deadlift 4 times a week competition stance and like actually not like tear off a limb. You know what I mean? So it's like when you're programming for like a powerlifting meet, obviously the closer you get, the more specific you want to be and the more of like the competition movements you want to do or like that we wanted to do, which is what we were discussing, like variations and what to do. But like you also have to take into account like what you can actually recover from and how many times a week you can actually do something sustainably without getting hurt.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I mean, not getting hurt.
Mm.
Like for me anyways, like in both my preps I ended up first my back got injured in the
Mm.
first prep, and then the second one I got the Crohn's thing. So that's the most important thing. If you're not healthy, then you're not going to compete well. So my advice is stick to RPE. And if you guys don't know what RPE stands for, is like rating of perceived exertion. So try to stick to an RPE that you could stick to, and it's not like overkill, and you're not going for super heavy lifts all the time, and sticking to a training that's focused more on like quality work than aiming for like crazy PRs every time. I think that's the key there.
Mm.
I agree. Yeah, like that pretty much chains exactly with what I said. Like doesn't matter if you're doing like everything like super specifically, if you get injured, then you can't
Yeah.
compete.
Yeah.
So even if you're going for like theoretically suboptimal gains by let's say doing like a variation that's like further away from the competition movement, like if you get on the platform healthy
Mm.
versus if you wouldn't, then that's all the difference.
So recovery is
Yeah.
important, right? As you get closer to the meet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, from our experience, I think like when you get closer to a meet, like the fatigue kind of accumulates throughout the weeks, right? And the closer you get, the more beat up you feel. And getting when you get to those final days before competing, that taper part of the program is going to be important, because that's when you kind of lay off all the heavy weights, lower the volume a little bit, and that's when you kind of get to recover and kind of compensate from all the fatigue that you got.
Yeah.
So
Pretty
Mm.
much.
yeah, I think it's important to have a good like peaking model, which I don't think we had the best one, but we could discuss that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start with that, you can.
I think, yeah, like I think the way we structured it was like we kind of first of all laid off the volume, right? Just lower how much we did, and then kind of lower even I think the amount of sessions we had, right? I think initially we were doing 4 times per week, and we ended up doing like three, and then getting even closer to the meet, like we had like I think what one session the week of,
Yeah, the week of the
like
meet, we
taper
had
week,
like one
right?
on Monday. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we had like one on Monday or Tuesday, and then the meet on the Saturday.
which yeah, and I think the reason why our like that peaking model was maybe not ideal was I think since we were like I was injured, and it kind of made it like difficult to follow, and at that point I wasn't even following like a taper and a peaking model. It was just kind of going with like how I felt, like, all right, do I want to work out today? No, then I wouldn't do
Mm.
it. So I think if we could find something that we could stick to even more, it would be the best.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean like that just kind of goes like with the fundamentals of like making a program. It's like you could have as much theory as you want behind it. Like you could put what on paper should be the perfect deload, the perfect taper, but it's like different people have different needs. Like even the smallest thing, like you said, like maybe benching twice a week before your meet instead of once is like a deal breaker. Or benching 3 times a week the week of your meet is like super important. Like people won't know that until they try it.
Mm.
Pretty
Yeah, that's
much.
that's a good point. Everyone's different, right? Some people like higher frequency, whereas others don't. It just depends how your body reacts to this certain stimulus.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, everyone's different in that
Yeah.
regard, I would say.
Yeah, I guess younger, more, teenage people can take more, I guess, abuse, or can go through a lot more reps and sets than, us older folks. No, I'm kidding. We're not. But,
Yeah, like Anthony could take more abuse than we can.
yeah. Yeah.
For now.
But
Anthony, when you get to our age, training's going to be different.
once you get to
Yeah.
the old
The
age,
whole 5 year difference.
Yeah, the 7 year difference.
7 years.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, was there anything else like training related that you want to kind of point out or something like that, or did we kind of cover all that stuff?
I mean, we spoke about the RPE, how important that was. Spoke about how like maybe sometimes being super specific isn't the right answer. Sometimes, depending on the person.
Yeah.
Spoke about tapering. I mean, I guess what we didn't speak about is what you do the rest of the year.
Yeah. So what kind of program do you run most of the year? Like kind of the evergreen program.
Yeah, like pretty much the rest of the year. I like you said, like that's exactly what I think we came up with was like an evergreen program where it's like you just rerun the same thing over and over again. Maybe you change the variations and the rep ranges a little bit here and there, but like it's really just focused on hypertrophy. Like
Yeah.
maybe like I know like sometimes I keep in my singles, or Evan, I think you keep in some singles or like some sets of three sometimes as well. But it's like for the most part, it's like unless you're like going for a meet, you might as well increase the amount of muscle you have on your frame so that next time you go for a meet prep and you're like getting into the lower rep ranges and you're getting more like strength adaptations as you get closer and closer to like singles, I guess. You want to have as much muscle as possible to like really transition all that strength potential in terms of like more muscle mass to more weight on the bar on the platform.
Yeah. And I've heard, I can't remember exactly which like high level power lifter said this, but it's like what you should focus on is most of the year building your base so wide and basically, yeah, just building your base in general, building all that muscle. And then when you get closer to a meet, it's like you have to teach your body how to use all that new muscle and make it like super
mm,
specific.
Exactly. Like I think it was Ed Cohen who said like his year round training is pretty much like him building a suit so that when he goes into a meet like he doesn't get injured and like he's just like strong as hell.
Can you repeat that last part? What was you kind of cut off there? What was it that you what was he trying to say? Ed
Like he
Cohen?
said something along the lines of like I can't remember exactly, but he said something along the lines of like my year round training is like for me to build like a body of armor.
mm.
Yeah.
So that when I go into a meet prep, it's like I'm not going to get injured. I have a sufficient amount of muscle to make more strength gains, so on and so forth.
Yeah, he kind of says that he wants to have like chunks of armor everywhere,
Huh.
right? Like every like if there's a small, for example, if you mess up your technique a little bit, then you could have like this chunk of armor protecting you in the back. Like if something goes
Huh.
wrong, you'll have, let's say you're in a position where you need to use your upper chest more, then those heavy inclines are going to help build that upper chest, for example, and you'll be set for if something goes wrong.
Yeah, pretty much something
So
like
it's
that.
better to be like
Yeah.
a thicker power lifter than a skinny power lifter. Oh,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry
it was
about
the
that.
phone. It's all good. I mean, yeah, I don't think he's necessarily trying to say like thicker, or I guess what he means is just try to be
Mm.
balanced, right? Don't leave any stones like unturned. Just make sure that you do all your accessory work
So
and
you're well developed all
don't.
around because, yeah,
Yeah,
everything comes together to help you, in those three compound lifts, right?
yeah, exactly. I think, and yeah, back on the programming thing, one thing that I think both of us kind of followed was how like Eddie Cohen used to like. If you guys don't know who Ed Cohen is, he's like probably one of the best powerlifters ever. I mean, I guess that's up to debate, but like one of the strongest powerlifters ever lived, kind of thing. And the way he used to structure his like training blocks would be, he would do like for let's say a couple of weeks he would do sets of 8, and then he would just do sets of 8 for that time, and then he would go to the next block, and then he would become more specific. He would do sets of 6, and then leading into the meet he would just get more and more specific to what he needs to do that day. And we experimented with that, and I think it worked pretty well for me anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I think Anthony, you tried that as well, right?
Yeah, something along those lines. I mean, I don't do it exactly like that, like always sets of 8, but like I have a bit more of like a balanced approach, I guess. But like, so it's like on average, my sets will be like higher reps further away from a meet. Or like let's say right now where I don't have a meet in the near future, like like my reps are usually like a lot higher. So instead of doing like triples and sets of 2 or 3 or 4, like I'm doing pretty much like sets of 5, sets of 8, sets of 7, just higher reps in general,
Mm-hmm.
get more volume.
So do you like doing like the heavy singles throughout the year, or you haven't really experimented with that yet?
Yeah, honestly, I think genuinely like as a concept, heavy like year round singles are probably like the smartest thing to have if you can handle it, and if you don't like excite your like, because the thing is that psychologically some people they get way too like attached to that number. So like let's say as soon as they see that number go down slightly, whether it's because of an external factor like let's say for me, with my second meet prep when I filled 365, I could have easily got all in my head like, oh, I might as well just quit now, this and that, without taking into account like I literally had terrible recovery for 3 consecutive days before that lift. So it's like, for certain people, maybe having that isn't like the best because they might get in their own. But as a concept of like, you want to keep practice high with like what you're doing on the platform, like, yeah, it's probably one of the best things to have in your program if you can handle it and not go crazy either with like maxing out every week because that's not what it is supposed to be
Mm.
either. Again, a single is supposed to be like a practice. You're supposed to be keeping up your practice with the lift with a 1 rep.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think with the singles, it could be good also to kind of like if especially if you're competing in powerlifting. Maybe if you're not competing in powerlifting, it's not that useful. But to practice the commands too. Getting
Mm.
closer to a meet, like just on bench. Start and press and rack, things like that. It could really help you on meet day, feeling more comfortable with that. Practice like long pauses, like for the press command on
Mm.
bench, for example. Things that could make you feel more at ease on that day. And if something goes wrong, let's say the judges are giving long pauses to everyone on bench, then you practice that already, and you're going to feel confident that you could pause for a long time,
Mm.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
pretty
think,
much.
yeah. And I think that's something we did during our meet preps. Like towards the end, we just kept drilling those commands.
Yeah, I remember like one of our days was literally just like an SBD day, and all it was commands the whole time.
Mm.
Yeah. And when you say SBD day, you mean like for people that don't know, you mean like a
Like
day, yeah, like
a
a day
day where
where you
you do
do,
like squat, bench, deadlift.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, at a powerlifting meet, you're going to be doing those 3 lifts. So in your training, at some point, you should at least have a day where you practice all 3 lifts combined in one day. Because yeah, if you want to do upper lower splits, you could do that, but it's not going to be it's not going to be as good for powerlifting because powerlifting is those 3 lifts in the same day. So if you're just used to doing squats and then the next day you're doing bench and then the third day you're doing deadlifts, then when you get to a powerlifting meet, you're not going to be used to having that accumulation of all 3 lifts on the same day. And I think it's important to do
Mm.
those kind of SBD days.
Yeah. Bas-
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point because especially that the squat and the deadlift are both like pretty much lower body movements. Like I think like a lot of people might get confused that, oh, why is my deadlift like so much lower on meet day than in training? And it's because, well, if you've never trained it right after squats, well, there you go. You're pretty much maxing out on squats, and then you're expected to max out on deadlift. So obviously, it's not going to be as high as what you could do fresh at the start of a workout on deadlifts.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people end up kind of not practicing that,
Mm.
right? They kind of just leave them standalone, like, okay, one day deadlift, one day squat, and then they get to the meet and they're like, what the heck? Like, I'm not used to this. And it's important to do that.
Yeah, basically practice for the meet.
Although,
Yeah, like what you're gonna be
yeah,
doing.
like year round, I wouldn't necessarily always do SBD days. I would still have kind of like a squat day and then like a deadlift day separate. And then when you get close to the meet, then you could combine them, because if you do them all the time combined, I think it would probably be worse for fatigue management, right?
Mm.
Probably. I mean, if you're doing like competition squats and competition deadlifts on the same day, like year round,
Week after week, yeah.
Might.
probably not the best idea for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think it's
Mm.
just more sustainable to have them on different days, and then when you just want to be, more specific for the meet, then yeah, just put them on the same day. But you don't have to do that every time. You could just have one SBD day in your week. It doesn't have to be like four of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think SBD days are pretty taxing in general, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's like I remember once. I think it took me and you like what 3.5 hours to finish one, something ridiculous like that.
They're long
Oh yeah,
workouts.
Like
that
it's
one day in
it's
my
long.
house.
Yeah, like it's long. Warming up to relatively heavy
Mm,
weights, resting, obviously, practicing commands, making sure everything's right
yeah.
with techniques and
Heiko's
stuff.
always like, man, you guys work out for like 5 hours. What is this?
Can't. It's too long for me. I got other stuff to do. No, but I mean, I
Yeah.
understand when you're preparing for a
Yeah,
competition like that. You know, it takes time and effort and sweat and tears, and you know, you gotta
Yeah.
love it.
As as they say, if you sweat more in training, you'll bleed less on the competition days. So
Wise words.
it's rough. Yeah, it's rough during honestly, you know what? I kind of find weird. Just on both the meets I did, like even after the meet, I still felt like I had more like I felt like I could have done more deadlifts. Like it was like we were so conditioned for that. Then after the meet, I was like, wow, that was it. Like it was weird. That's how I
Mm.
felt, anyways.